it's a really good way to just mention to leaders who are listening to the podcast. The journey of leadership never ends. It's not a straight line, it's almost cyclical. And you stay with it. It's like being a parent. We talked about this earlier. You never stop being a parent. I don't care how old you get. Your parents are your parents, right? So a very similar mindset for leaders is as your team members mature and grow and step into roles and expand. You've got to keep growing.
Welcome to The Change Lead, the podcast providing leaders with the insight needed to get things done in a rapidly changing and complex world. Subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss an episode. Connect with our community of like-minded leaders on our website, thechangelead.com. Welcome to The Change Lead with your host, Babatope Ipinyomi.
Leadership matters. In our rapidly changing world, effective leadership can be the difference between success and irrelevance. So, what does effective leadership look like in a changing world? How can leaders at all levels learn to be effective as our world changes? To discuss this with me today is Dr. Flo Falayi. Now, Dr. Flo is a dynamic leadership psychologist, executive coach, and inclusion strategist. He's a well-respected thought leader, focused on helping leaders and organizations become better versions of themselves and more inclusive. In this episode, Dr. Flo and I have a conversation on effective leadership in a changing world. Stay tuned. I'm sure you will enjoy it. Hi, Dr. Flo. Thanks for joining me today. I'm really looking forward to today's conversation. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Babatope. It's actually a great pleasure to be here and looking forward to our time together today.
Perfect. Thanks. I've really been looking forward to this for months actually. I've been
That's
I've
right.
been reading up on your LinkedIn newsletter. So
Thank
I
you.
think something about your newsletter. I have to say it's a brilliant newsletter, by the way. Um, what each article, each episode has very powerful message, very succinct message. And at the end, when you sign out from each episode, you refer to yourself as the hybrid leader. And I want to start with that. I think it's very unique. What does that mean? What does it mean to be a hybrid leader?
No, thank you. That's it. First and foremost, thank you for reading, and then thank you for providing feedback because it's the feedback that helps us get better. And then to your question around the hybrid leader, that actually is something that came out of my exploration and my research around the power and the influence of culture on leadership abilities. And I actually did a study, a research as part of my doctoral program, looking at how culture influences leaders and their leadership style. And what I observed was, as perhaps you know, and a few others that know who listen to your amazing podcast, I deem myself a hybrid because I was born in the US, but I lived and I grew up, I was socialized in Lagos, Nigeria. And I realized in many instances, operate quite effectively within the two cultures. And I thought there was something there. So I did a qualitative research around what could be driving that essence of leadership. And I branded that as the hybrid leader. And coincidentally, that book will be coming out in 2024 as well.
Nice. I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to it. Nice. Yeah. I like that concept, that ability to traverse multiple cultures. It's not something
Yeah.
you think about a lot. That culture plays such a big part in your ability to be a leader. Um, I think, and many people they'll have that diversity within them.
Yeah.
They may not see it as a strength. They may be unaware of that strength. So that's quite key. It's good that you're bringing it out. So looking forward to the book.
Yeah.
I was not aware of it until you mentioned it now, actually. So no, really looking forward to it. Um, if we stick with leadership, so a key attribute of being an effective leader,
Mhm.
I think, is trust.
Yes.
That ability to
for trust to be in that relationship when you're leading. Um, Earlier in this year, I think around July, there was an article you put out, and you made a statement there that you cannot assume trust as a leader. You
Mm,
really need to be earning trust.
yeah,
It would be good to dig into that as well.
I,
Why
I
is it?
love
Why
that.
are leaders even assuming trust in the first place, and why do they need to not assume trust but
Mm,
really earn the trust?
mm. Again, there are many questions within that question you've posed, so I'll try to unpack it as judiciously as I can. Um, Let me start with the essence around leadership, especially how leaders also make assumptions. I think the speed and the rate of change that we're dealing with on a consistent basis, both internal, external, both based off factors that we control and factors that we do not control, has actually, unfortunately limited the amount of time leaders have to, in my mind, do what we call complete due diligence across every spectrum of their influences. And then so what happens when you don't have enough time to do that, what we call a comprehensive, exhaustive inquiry, is that you make certain assumptions, right? There are books that actually have done a great deal of expose on being able to make instant read and being able to make certain decision points based off certain patterns. And so as leaders, part of what you learn as you grow in your role as a leader is the ability to do those things. And so now when you now get to the point where you're a leader and you're leading people, you're a leader of leaders, the tendency to make assumptions that just because I'm here and just because I show up and just because I have this responsibility or just because I have this title, therefore people should do XYZ. One of those things is actually trust. There's some leaders who, just by virtue of them being in certain positions, have certain responsibility, assume that the trust accompanies the position. In some instances, it does, right? So a good example could be when you go visit your doctor. You will hope there is a trust that you as the patient will in, invariably actually ascribe to the doctor until the doctor proves otherwise. Unfortunately, with leadership, some leaders assume the same, and that's not the case in all instances because of people who have had negative experiences or people who are waiting for you to show the value that you bring as a leader. So again, I want to just initially first lay that foundation around that assumptive nature of leaders around trust. Then the second piece around being trustworthy is this essence around the fact that it's an exchange. It is literally an exchange of value. Value in the sense of if I have a leader, for example, who's doing one thing or the other for me, the exchange, therefore, is that I know that leader is going to deliver on these set promises. And as a result, I can then trust that that individual will accomplish that goal. And I give them that trust from my end. In essence, there is a corresponding action that actually invites trust. And leaders have to be mindful of that and really hone in on that value stream, right? And once there is that emphasis on the value, then the leader can make with a higher sense of perhaps precision or being more definitiveness that I, as the recipient of that value, will give my trust as an exchange. So I think when leaders begin to understand fully that essence and that exchange that occurs, and oftentimes it's mostly mental, in some instances it's emotional, right? But when that exchange happens, that's when trust really becomes a reality in terms of that leadership relationship and kind of how people feel around that leader as well. Now again, there was one instance. So I recall the article you're talking about, and I'll keep quiet in a minute. And I'd like to maybe just place some definition around trust. There is a cognitive trust, right? And leaders have to be intentional and mindful of it. And that cognitive trust is based on competence, reliability, and credibility. It is that sense that people trust that that leader has what he or she needs to be able to perform and execute. Then there is the affective trust. And that is purely based off emotional connection. It's got nothing to do necessarily about how competent, how effective you are, how knowledgeable you are, how much of an expert you are. It's built through empathy, respect, the sense of care and value that you either are demonstrating in your words or actions. And it also evident with how you listen to people, right? How you offer support and how you promote that culture where everybody feels safe. So oftentimes what happens is that leaders lean into that cognitive trust. Trust me because I got these credentials, I've got this exposure, I've got this experience. And while that is true and that is helpful, there is the other part of it as well that must not be neglected, which is the affective trust, which is grounded in the emotions. It's how people feel. It's how people are actually perceiving your emotions and your EQ, your cultural intelligence, how people are seeing you as a human being. And all of those play a distinct role in helping form the whole gambit around trust.
Yeah, you've put out brilliantly, actually. And one thing as you were speaking is, I would just think to myself, I need to watch out for situations whereby I'm assuming trust as well.
Mm.
Because you say, I'll look at myself. Sometimes I catch myself saying, "Oh, from experience, we should do this."
Yeah.
But from what you're saying here, it's almost a case of that's probably not something to go. That's not a path to go down. You need to, in each context, in each situation, start afresh
Yeah.
and earn that trust. Even though you might have had the experience, you know what you're doing from the previous context,
Mhm.
but you've got a new team, a new context, a new situation. You need to earn the context. You need to earn the trust with these new stakeholders, with this new
Yeah.
team, effectively. Okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's why the work of leadership is hard, right? Because many leaders want to switch on their leadership ability in autopilot. I did this for one individual or this team before one other new individual joins the team. And leaders don't want to go back and rebuild that trust and rehash the norms of the team as it's forming and spend time in the trenches, as it were, of enabling the team to be the best it can be. And the challenge is that if the leaders don't commit that time and put in the effort to nurture the essence of trust and to nurture the essence of the team and to nurture and to continue to speak to the intention of the organization or the vision, you know, and you make assumption, you're going to find yourself back where you started, not being able to close the deal, not being able to perfect what you actually started or you said you would do, not being able to, exceed expectation, as it were. And so it's a really good way to just mention to leaders who are listening to the podcast. The journey of leadership never ends. It's not a straight line, it's almost cyclical. And you stay with it. It's like being a parent. We talked about this earlier. You never stop being a parent. I don't care how old you get. Your parents are your parents, right? So a very similar mindset for leaders is as your team members mature and grow and step into roles and expand. You've got to keep growing. Nature abhors the vacuum. You've got to keep growing. You've got to keep expanding and be intentional about what the essence is that you're trying to create for the team or the organization.
Yeah, I think I like what you just said there. Leadership is not easy. It's leadership is hard to describe. It's hard to execute properly. There's a phrase you use a lot with leadership. You say, "Leadership is not a title."
Mm.
Okay, it's one of those phrases that got my attention when I started paying attention to what you have to say.
Yeah.
I like to delve into that. What do you mean by that when you say leadership is not a title?
That's something that is both a result of an experience that I had, as well as a realization as I spent time and I still spend time with leaders. As you know, part of my work at Conferry is um, really, really focusing on how do we help leaders be better so that we can have a better world, right? So very clear precinct mission statement. Our goal is to help leaders. We know leaders move and transform the world. How do we help them become better, right? So that's the remit. And that could take many different forms. It could be development, it could be facilitation, it could be coaching, it could be assessment, it could be team dynamics, right? There's a whole gamut of solution set that we provide. But to your question around leadership, why what I mean by leadership is not a title. It's first and foremost, it is not, because leadership is about influence, it's about impact, it's about taking initiative, right? It's more than those things that people assume to be a position or a title. And I remember very early in my career, I used to think when I become a leader, I will do ABC. Or when I become a leader, I will be more intentional about maybe the way I show up. Then it dawned on me, one of my mentors and sponsors really called me out one day and said, why are you waiting for a title when you can do some of the things that you're waiting on a title to do? And it just opened my aperture. It opened my eyes to see that leadership, when you boil it down, it's really about how you make others feel. It's about how you help others achieve. It's about how you enable others to become. And that does not require a title. By smiling to someone who's in the dumps, who's down emotionally, who needs a pickup, by leaning in if there's an opportunity that you identify in your team that needs someone to do or to cover, or a coverage that is actually overwhelmingly evident, or perhaps it's how you narrate some of the product offering that your organization provides into the world, right? All of these things are things that you don't need a title for, right? So I really felt if I could speak to my younger self, myself 20 years ago, 25 years ago, um, I would remind that young man, don't worry about titles. If you bring and add value, the titles will follow. But if you lean into providing value, you are a leader. And for me, the more I did that and the more I've spent time with leaders, that's one of the things that actually I hear them say over and over again. We're not looking for someone who needs a title. In fact, most people who get titles, if you ask them, they weren't looking for titles. They just wanted to make a difference. They just want to make a change. They just want to make things better, right? And as a result, people said that's a leader. So the leadership essence that I'm calling out is about the mindset, it's about the behavior, it's about how you think, it's about how you show up, it's about the things you control. Because if you focus on those things, it will lead you to things that perhaps is outside your control, like getting a promotion or getting opportunities or having business exchanges or being called to perhaps be a part of a partnership. Right? Again, the more you demonstrate leadership, adding value, providing something that is distinct, unique, needed around your sphere of influence, it elevates you automatically.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I think you're so true. I'm always looking for any team I'm with. I'm always looking for who are the leaders within the team. They might be the youngest person on the team, and you can see when it comes out that little spark
Yeah,
whereby they are ready to step out of their comfort zone, something they may not know. They're happy to go that extra mile. It's really brilliant.
yeah,
There's something you said just there where it was a mentor sponsor that triggered this. I think it'd be good to dig into that. The value of having people who are mentors, the value of having someone who's gone before and
yeah,
can help you on your journey.
yeah,
Um, Probably something you do a lot of now.
mhm,
Some people may not have that
yeah.
opportunity to have a mentor. How can you go about ensuring you cultivate or you make sure you have a mentor, you have people in your life who can support you and direct you and guide you?
I love that question because it's going to expose me for in a minute when I tell you my story. Um, Growing up, there's certain cultures where you grow up, and the essence around individuality is overly emphasized to the point to the point of one's personal detriment. Right. So, for example, I grew up in an environment, went to um, high school, middle school, where it was all about being the first and you're competing almost with your peers, and you have to either try to get to the top by pushing people down, right? So oftentimes the essence around mentorship and people, coaches and sponsors was seen as a sign of weakness, was even actually seen as if you need someone to help you get there, then you're not strong enough. So that was my background. Okay. That was my initial background. So if it came to, when it came down to academics, when it came down to my earlier career, it was all about me, trying to do, hoping I excel, right? And very quickly, I realized, maybe a few years into my career, I realized that going at it alone was one very exhausting. Because I was learning by making mistakes, right? There's some things that you need to learn by making mistakes, no doubt. But I was learning by making mistakes, and I stepped back. I was fortunate when I was able to actually talk this over with my manager at the time. And one of the things that the manager told me were things that were so simplistic. They were so mundane, to be honest with you. But there were simple things around, I can offer you help. There's a different way of doing whatever it is that you're doing. Ask, right? Ask questions. And he actually opened up the door and said, come into my office and ask me questions. I'm here to support you. I'll be forever grateful for that particular mentor, which is by design that I mentioned the impact he's had on my life. Because if for the first time he allowed me to begin to understand that there is collective power when you work with other people in pursuit of a goal, and that we can use experiences and insight from past stories and journeys as ladders to step on to get to a higher place. And that we don't have to, all of us, consistently start from the same place all the time. That we can, and I have this generational angle I'm going to mention in a minute, that we can, in a sense, step on the shoulders or sit upon the shoulders of those who've gone ahead of us and then proceed from there. So I always say this to my kids. My goal is not to, when they're done with college, it's not for them to start where I started, right? It's for them to start where I stopped. And in many instances, it's for me to provide a platform upon which they start, right? Rather than taking them back to when I got out of school in 1995 and saying, go back to 99. I mean, that was pre Y2K. That was even pre, the evolution of PC, right? Can you imagine if I asked them to go back to that world, right? So in my mind, this is really about how do you use mentors? How can mentors support you to be able to accelerate your growth and development? So I was very fortunate. I got good feedback. I used to be the kind of individual who didn't quite appreciate constructive feedback. And I'll be honest, I didn't like it. I wanted to be told that I was good, right? I wanted to be told I was doing well, that was okay. And I will tell you right now, with almost more than 30 years of being in the workforce, I would say I crave for constructive feedback more so than any other type of feedback. Because when you tell me, oh, you're good in this, you're good in that, I know. The question is, how do I do know that. I mean, there's a degree of self-awareness that comes around with this work, right? I know that. I know where I'm good. I know where I'm not so good. And I think being able to hear someone help you articulate how you can be better where you're good. So telling me I'm good is not, it doesn't do anything necessarily for me. It's telling me how I can be better. And that is why, I've leaned, as you know, I'm an executive coach. That's why I found significant value in coaching, because what a coach does is that he extends good to great, or he can take great to what we call elite. Ability to extend you beyond where you imagine you can get to, because now they're piling up on perhaps your strength and helping you identify blind spots and areas of improvement. And the last piece, I know you asked about coaching and sponsor, and the last piece is around sponsors. The interesting thing about sponsors is that, and there's a lot of, I wish we had more time to unpack it, but I've posted and I've shared more about this on my LinkedIn profile. So folks can find it, and it's all over the internet. But the interesting thing about sponsorship is that it is about the value that you bring that they can then, in a sense, verbalize and use their capital to enhance, accelerate, and disseminate. So oftentimes sponsors need something from you. They need how they need your work style, your work approach, your ability to deliver what we call both qualitative, real, tangible results, right? Your ability to execute and to do amazing work, right? Whatever that work might be business, it might be in a career, it might be workforce, whatever that is, right? You need to first deliver. You need to first do your part. What sponsors do is that they take that and leveraging their social capital and their relationship capital, they're able to talk about you. I love how it's said. Talk about you behind closed doors. Mention you in places where you're not perhaps in, or talk about you in areas and spaces when your name comes up. That's what sponsorship does. So a mentor will show you the way, a coach will elevate your ability to deliver, and a sponsor is actually the one then who amplifies and spreads your good news, as it were.
Indeed. So it sounds like we all need coaches, we all need mentors, and we all
Hmm.
definitely need sponsors from
Absolutely.
from what you're saying. Nice. I want to switch to something quite topical
Hmm.
right now. So right now, there's a lot going on, a lot being said about AI,
Hmm.
whether it's hype, whether it's reality, we don't know. We'll find out soon enough. But from the lens of a leader, so a leader coming to maybe being a leader for many years or even a brand new leader,
Yeah.
and they're having to deal with this new emerging theme. I
Hmm.
don't even know, I just call it a theme right now,
Yeah.
artificial intelligence. What advice, what would you say to leaders dealing with this emerging theme right now, the AI?
It's a great question, and I would say this. I'm not happy to go a little bit deeper into it, but I would say this upfront that leaders have to be mindful, they have to be aware, and they have to be intentional about one, the benefits, the impact, and to some extent the risk, the associated risk with a new powerful technology. About a year and a half or so ago, when again, very much early, when the public began to know more about AI, because AI has been it's been around for a while, right? There's been research, there's been people who've been working in the background on this. But I think about maybe 2 or so years ago, it began to get more into what we call the public consciousness. Now, where the point now where it's gradually shifting into the mainstream of the consciousness, right? And at this juncture, uh, leaders have to know that this is not a technology that is going to fizzle out, right? It's not a flash in the pan, as it were. This is definitely here to stay. Um, and to support that, I think leaders have to be intentional about okay, how then do you leverage and engage with this technology, especially with what you do in your organization and what you also intend to do in the immediate future. So that's at a high level. And at more intentional, perhaps pragmatic level, is I would recommend that leaders get in the weeds a little bit, go beyond. We know it's coming. Get more into the generative AI. See the impact. See what it does, and to some extent, begin to experiment with it. Right? Because I don't think it's a technology that we can ignore by any means. I think this is a technology that will infiltrate our entire life in terms of what we do and how we do it. And so the earlier I think leaders begin to get into it and begin to experiment, there's chat GPT, there are all kinds of tools out there, right? The more folks get into it, I think the better they will be long term, both for the well-being of their key stakeholders and themselves.
I like that. Being intentional. It
Mhm.
sounds like they need to embrace the change that's coming, but being aware so you don't just go into it blindly. So I think I like that. It sounds like leaders need to embark on a journey of lifelong learning, particularly with this as well.
Absolutely.
This is
Absolutely.
what I'm hearing. Um, I want to speak something we've not spoken. Another part of your work is around diversity and inclusion. So I know coming close to the end, but I just want to touch on it,
Yeah.
um, because I think it sort of rounds out a bit of what you represent and who you are. Um, can you speak to how organizations can embrace inclusive leadership?
Yeah. That's a beautiful question, and that is definitely something that keeps me up uh, at night. And I'll be honest. So I'm constantly thinking. It's part of my work for sure, and I'm constantly thinking, how do we ensure we build inclusive organization? And as we both have agreed much earlier, it definitely starts at the top, right? So if you want an inclusive organization, I think oftentimes the narrative is has been maybe perhaps more legislative, as it were. We have to be, we should be. I get it, and I think it's ideal. And I think the angle I come to it as well is also from the angle of the value it provides to the entire ecosystem. The more inclusive an organization is, the more inclusive we are as an organization, the more the entire organization benefits. Because what inclusion really means by definition is that it provides everyone both the space, the opportunity to do their best work. And so when you say I'm being inclusive, it's not a political statement. It is not because you're trying to um, uh, perhaps maybe score some, credit from either public or what have you. It's about you're answering the fundamental existential question around how do we ensure this organization really brings and satisfy the value within all our employees' hearts, right? In essence, how do we ensure that everyone feels a sense of belonging and everyone feels that in this organization they can actually do their best work? So that's the essence. That's the mission, the why behind the call for inclusion or the call for inclusive leadership. So with that mission, then we have a very, very distinct approach that we take. It starts from the top. There is a leadership angle. There is a systemic, what we call a systemic component for inclusion. There is a behavioral component of inclusion, right? Leaders, the systems, the structure, the processes, the policies. Then there's the behavior, the language, the demeanor, the mindset, the culture. Those are all behavioral. And then beneath all of that, we have what we call the change lens, because it is inclusive leadership is about driving change that benefits all. And you're a change professional, you know how hard change is. Change takes time, right? So it's a triangle. It's got the base as change, it's got the system, the behavior, and then at the top of the triangle, the apex, is the leadership piece. So we focus on all those four distinct areas to moving the organization from where they are to perhaps more inclusive. That also means that we then get to measure. Every component that I've called out has to be measured, because there's a powerful quote that says, um, and I'm paraphrasing it, it talks about it's what gets measured that actually improves. And it's just a natural, I would say, evolutionary trait that we all have, that, if you focus on this and you're measuring, and then people will gravitate towards that and really focus on improving it. So again, measuring the degree to which leadership is inclusive, both in thoughts, in action, in behavior. And you also look at structure. What's the movement of employees across the organization? How do things occur when people ask for either time off and sick leave? How equitable are all the structures and the systems? So we look at that. Then there's the behavioral piece. How do you invite divergent voices in meetings? How do you ensure that you bring voices global? We live in a global world. How do you ensure that you bring other parts of the world into your decision making process? How do you ensure that everyone in the room is heard, right? How do you make sure that those who have certain challenges um, How do we it might be neuro, maybe physical challenges or abilities. How do you ensure that all of those are factored into how we act and how we behave as an organization? And then you have that element around change. What are the milestones? What are the key metrics? What are the essence that you're trying to get to? And how quickly do you need to get there? So it's I hope I answered the question right, but it's a combination of a lot of things. But inclusive leadership, when it's done right, it elevates the entire organization. Everyone is seen, everyone is heard and valued, and the entire ecosystem benefits.
Yeah, I think brilliantly put there. We could go on and on that topic. To be honest, but I think I like the point you're making there, whereby you're not being inclusive to win any brownie points or get any credit for anything. It's
Mhm.
actually of benefit to not just the organization but the ecosystem within which the organization is operating. So that's really well put. Um, I think we're coming close to the end of our time. I think we could go on. I wish I could. But in closing, it would be
Yeah.
good for our audience to know a little bit about Dr. Flo. So, who is Dr. Flo? What interesting work are you doing right now? How can people reach out to you?
Thank you, thank you for this spotlight on me. So this is what I like to first and foremost say. So I'm very passionate about leadership development, executive development, executive coaching, and inclusion. So I operate at the intersection of those three things: empowering, enabling, elevating, developing leaders. Also with coaching and ensuring that we're building that inclusive organization. So in essence, as we build, I mentioned this earlier, as we build better leaders so that we can have a better world. And that really is at the core of who I am. Then, in addition to that, I work with leaders across Fortune 500 companies and their organization doing exactly what I've talked about. How do we elevate leaders' ability to do more with less, for example? How do we challenge, equip leaders to really bring their best self to the office? Those are things that I'm unpacking. We talk about AI. How do we enable leaders to be successful in a world where there's more technology, more AI infused into our world? How do we help leaders be more empathetic? How do we help them to thrive in spite of the advancement in technology as humans? And there's this other piece that is a key part of the work I do around enterprise leadership, right? One of the key things that we did at Conferry was a research around enterprise leaders who lead across functions and across the entire enterprise. And we realized as we collated the data, we saw that there were only about 14% of leaders across the world who actually exhibit the what we call the traits and the elements of enterprise leadership. And one of the key dimensions around enterprise leadership research itself is that leaders really oscillate between performative work and transformative work. And how do they move effectively between perform, which is about keeping the lights on in the business, making sure the business continues to function and deliver on its services and products, as well as how do you transform and change the organization for tomorrow. So how do we equip leaders who must dance, that performative and transformative dance? So those are the key things that I'm doing. And like I also mentioned, I'm beginning to pen my thoughts on two books. I'm working on two books. One is going to be titled Leadership is Not a Title. We talked about that. And then the second one is on the hybrid leader. So those two books, watch out. They're coming out in 2024.
Wow, I think you are a busy man, but what you're doing is brilliant. I have to say thank you so much for making the time. I know it's taken a while for us to get here, but thank you so much for making the time. Brilliant conversation. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Flo.
My pleasure. And thank you for having me. And again, you know how to reach me. So I'm looking forward to more conversation in the future. Thank you again for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to my conversation with Dr. Flo. If you'd like to connect with Dr. Flo, check the show notes to find details. If this episode was of value to you, please consider leaving a review wherever you get your podcasts. Leaving a review is the absolute best way to support the podcast and ensure I continue to have great guests on the show. Now you can tune in on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube, Audible, Pocket Casts, Radio Public, the Change Lead website, and many more platforms. To continue the conversation, please connect with me on LinkedIn and let me know what you think of the show. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have a great rest of your day and see you next time.